Poland's agriculture minister quits over Ukrainian products flooding into the country. Zelensky calls Poland a sister nation. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and yet another explanation of hard things in easy terms by UATV. The point of view on international agenda directly from Ukraine. Zelensky was greeted with the full pomp due a visiting head of state completely with military bands and marching soldiers. At the presidential palace in Warsaw, Polish President Duda decorated Zelensky with the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's oldest and most prestigious order for being an exemplary leader of the state and nation. It is a sign of the weight of the relationship between the two countries. Poland and Ukraine have centuries of tangled ties, often cooperating, sometimes warring against each other. However, Russia's full-scale invasion has made them very, very close allies.
It's a great honor for me to be here today with my wife and to thank the President, his team, the Polish government and every Pole for what you have already done. You have not abandoned Ukraine. You have stood shoulder to shoulder with us and we are grateful for it. I believe that this is a historical relation, a historic result and a historic strength between our countries.
Volodymyr Zelensky's state visit Wednesday to Warsaw blew up right into a political crisis. Poland's agriculture minister quit on the same day over his inability to cut the amount of Ukrainian agricultural products flooding into the country. Cheaper and soaring Ukrainian inputs made the purchase prices for the domestic market drop in half. Farmers' outrage is growing. As the European Commission would not agree to reimpose tariffs and duties on Ukrainian grain inputs, a move his ministry has been calling for since December, despite initial opposition from the country's leadership, Kowalczuk decided to resign.
Since it is very clear that the farmers' basic demand will not be met by the European Commission, I have made a decision and resigned as Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Henryk Kowalczyk, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Poland 2021-2023.
Many say that it casts a shadow over Zelensky's presence in the Polish capital. Well, I would like to stress just one thing. There is no light without a shadow, and the contrasting shadowy background of the purely economic routine issues between our states that undoubtedly will be resolved, a bright light of a mutual cooperation and prosperity is only seen better. Ukraine is open to negotiations and proposals. The help of the Polish nation to Ukraine is hard to overstate. As said by Polish government spokesperson Müller, Zelensky met with Duda to discuss the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, supplying more weapons to Kyiv and Ukraine's tighter integration with the EU, as well as, of course, the problem of soaring farm product inputs.
We want to conduct these talks in the spirit of thinking about the future. Zelensky choosing Warsaw shows what role we play in international politics today.
Zelensky has been in Poland before, usually in transit to other destinations or in rapid unofficial visits. However, this is the first official trip. It is a bare fact Poland has been one of the Ukraine's closest and most important allies in the fight against Russia's invasion, pledging key military aid to Kyiv and sending some of its Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jets, the first of which arrived Tuesday in Ukraine.
4 MiG-29s that remained in storage have been handed over the Ukrainian armed force in recent months. 4 MiGs are now being given, so 8 in total. We are ready, as I told the President, to give 6 more that are currently being prepared. We assume that could be transferred soon. We also have MiG aircraft at our disposal, which have been upgraded to NATO standards. If we are talking first of all about communication and issues related to the implementation of our policy in the mission within NATO, we will need these MiGs for the time being, but when they are released through new aircraft, that will come into our possession, like the Fa-50 from South Korea, as we hope for F-35 aircraft. I am convinced that in the future we will be able to transfer another fleet, our MiG-29s, if necessary.
Zelensky also reiterated his plea for more military aid. The more ammunition we get, the faster we will be able to deal with the situation in Bakhmut and in the entire country, he said, referring to the protracted battle for the eastern Ukrainian city that has been one of the focal points of this war. Both in general and in particular, Zelensky's visit should be taken as a sign of trust and of thanking Poland and Poles for their support. And that is what Zelensky did. He thanked Poland as a state and ordinary Poles for their reception and help for ordinary Ukrainians. After all, Poland has become home to about 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees, the largest number in Europe. At Zelensky's request, the two presidents held a joint speech at Warsaw Royals Castle.
There is a temptation, fueled by Russian propaganda and disinformation, for a ceasefire as soon as possible at all costs, and consequently to make peace with Russia, which in fact will mean that Russia will take Ukrainian land, which it now occupies. There must be no agreement for that. The politics of appeasing Putin, carried out for years by many European leaders, has borne position fruit.
And as Volodymyr Zelensky puts it, Russia won't win with Europe when Poles and Ukrainians stand united. We are going to enjoy peace together in everything, in the EU and NATO. Well, amen to that. Russia will defend its national interests at the UN Security Council. I'll say that again. A country that started a war in the middle of Europe in the 21st century will use the UN Security Council to defend its national interests. You think this is some kind of a prank or sort of a fiction, the opinion of some analyst or a political scientist gone crazy? No. This is a direct quote from Maria Zakharova, spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry. So, the institute that should work on world security will work to defend the national interest of Russia under the presidency of Russia. A terrorist country with a president who is a renowned criminal at large according to the decision of European Parliament and the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and International Criminal Court sounds absurd. But we have only started. The UN Security Council will soon be discussing the death of Russian propagandist Vladimir Tatarsky, who is called a journalist by the Kremlin. I'll fill you in. This is the guy who in 2011 got into prison for robbing a bank. So much for the journalist, right? He served a sentence on the territory of the Donetsk region, which was seized by the Russians in 2014. When got out, Tatarsky moved to Moscow and became a military blogger. That is how they in Russia are calling propaganda heads. He called for strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure so that as many of our people would freeze to death as possible. However, he became notorious after he recorded a video from the Kremlin when Putin declared the territories captured in Ukraine to be Russian. I must first apologize for showing you this, but you have to hear and see this with your own eyes.
That's all. Europe is need. Behind us are not just some abstract forces. Behind us is Russia with nuclear weapons and army mobilization. We defeat everyone because we don't have another chance. That's all. We will defeat everyone. We will kill everyone. We will rob everyone we want. Everything will be the way we like it.
Trust me. It is a literary translation, since the English language simply does not have all those definitions of sexual violence that exist in the Russian language and were used by Tatarsky, who belonged to a group of hardline war bloggers, vultures of war, who fully supported the Russian invasion of Ukraine and criticized Putin and the Russian military command for being too soft. And so, one fine Saturday in St. Petersburg, Tatarsky decides to throw a creative party for those Z-crazies. During this event, a bomb exploded and Comrade Tatarsky, the prop head, the journalist, and a common Russian fascist, was blown to pieces. The Russian National Republican Army took responsibility for this action. I don't know who these guys are. Probably some yet another terrorist organization in the territory of a terrorist state. And this army declared that the action was prepared and carried out them autonomously. And there was no communication and no help from any foreign structure, let alone special services. That is, now, Russia wants the internal conflicts within the country to be discussed at a meeting of the UN Security Council. I don't know what the exact goal of the Kremlin is. To embarrass oneself even more, make a comedy show or completely discredit the UN Institute, but in my opinion, this is absurdly absurd. Tatarsky was posthumously included in Wagner PMC ranks, an international criminal organization. So, yes, the UN Security Council, under the presidency of the terrorist state, will now be discussing the death of a representative of international criminal organization. By the way, Russia has some kind of abnormal, or rather said normal, for Russia desire to drag criminals of all sorts to the UN Security Council. During the first meeting in April, they invited Maria Lviv-Belova. Yes, this is the authorized representative of the Russian Federation for Children's Rights. A few weeks ago, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for her and Putin for the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. And she was also supposed to speak at the UN Security Council.
Maria Lvova-Belova is allegedly responsible for the war crimes of unlawful deportation and unlawful transfer of Ukrainian children. We blocked the meeting from being broadcast on UATV. She should not be afforded an UN platform to spread disinformation. If Maria Lvova-Belova wants to give an account of her actions, he can do this in The Hague.
Thanks to our partners from Great Britain who blocked the internet broadcast of the UN Security Council meeting regarding Ukraine. So now, the Deputy Ambassador of Russia to the EU, Dmitry Polyansky, said that from now on, Russia will block the broadcast of all such UN meetings, referring to the censorship clause of Great Britain. You know, the level of absurdity and cringe is already just too much for me.
Russian army killed another Ukrainian child, a 5-month-old boy named Danilo from Avdiivka in Donbass, together with his parents who were injured. Russian artillery, one of the hundreds of artillery strikes that the terrorist states launch every day. At the same time, Russia chairs the UN Security Council. It is hard to imagine something evident that proves the complete bankruptcy of such institutions.
Russia never legally became a UN member or a permanent member of the UN Security Council. The biggest diplomatic fraud in history was committed in 1991 when Russia simply switched nameplates with the USSR, including as one of the 5 permanent members of the UNSC. Russia has turned its seat as a permanent member into a throne of total impunity. The world is currently dealing with the consequences of the rule violation that occurred 32 years ago. Russia's status as a permanent member of the UN Security Council must be revoked, as well as its entire UN membership. The Russian presidency of the UN Security Council is a slap in the face to the international community. It emphasizes the importance of reforming the United Nations Security Council and other institutions tasked with ensuring global security. Putin is the first head of state to be charged with war crimes while his nation continues to hold a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. This can never be acceptable. So there is a critical importance of informing the Security Council, including the veto power which terrorist state Russia is abusing today. The problem with the human memory is not that you forget things. The terrifying quality of human memory is when you can't forget. How can one forget a pit full of dead people, with their hands tied behind their backs and bullet holes in their napes? This is terrible in itself, but can you imagine how much more terrible this dreadful spectacle becomes when you suddenly see a face you love in that pit? Your wife's, mother's, brother's, your child's. How do you forget this? And we never will, nor will we forgive.
A year has passed since the day when the Russian invaders were expelled from our city of Bucha, a city that the world did not yet know about, the city which since then the world will not forget. We won't let you forget. Human decency will not let you forget. On the streets of Bucha, the world saw Russian evil, evil without disguise. I saw what the Kremlin was trying to bring to other streets of Ukraine, other streets of Europe and the world, which could be destroyed by the Russian occupiers.
Zelensky visited Bucha alongside 4 other heads of state: President of Moldova Maia Sandu, Prime Minister of Slovakia Eduard Heger, Prime Minister of Slovenia Robert Golob, and Prime Minister of Croatia Andrej Plenković. Zelensky held bilateral meetings with them in Kyiv, after which they went to Bucha. Information about the proceedings of the meetings was not made public, and the visits were not announced ahead of time. You know, please let me be straightforward today. Well, I'm just trying to be polite. I will be straightforward even if you won't let me to. I could have been explaining to you now who met who said what, and how many bodies have been found on the streets of Bucha. We could have been arguing if 1,400 dead and 37 children among them is enough to call it genocide already, or we have to wait for another Buchas to be discovered, for more bodies to litter the streets, more ruined families, cities, wasted life, tortured to death men, raped women. How many atrocities does it take for the world to finally understand the worthy legal successor of the criminal entity, the Soviets? Putin's Russia always was, is, and always will be a treacherous lying monstrosity, a fascist tumor within the tissue of international law and justice that spreads metastases of destruction, regression, decline, and imperial colonial thinking across everything it touches, implying only one paradigm, a slave and a master, which implies Russia as a master and the rest of the world as its slaves. And all that, despite the fact that without Western technology, money, goods and market, Russia is nothing more than a huge gas station whose delusional owner is wielding a nuclear club in a desperate hope If it is not possible to arouse the respect of the world with your peaceful achievements, then at least to scare it with a nuclear destruction. All those who disagree with the above are either weak in their minds or fascists themselves. All those who say that the world should stop helping Ukraine or stop the war at any cost, as soon as possible, no matter if Russia will get the lands it has occupied in Ukraine or because it causes heating prices to grow, etc., are short-sighted cowards. They do not understand what we in Ukraine are fighting for and against. That is okay. I'm not going to explain anything to them. If they haven't understood it by now, they never will. To understand what Russia is, these people should have probably been finding their family members in pits full of dead bodies, and their daughters should have been raped and sons abducted and sent to Russia. Let's call things what they are. It is with our criminal indifference and inaction that all evil on earth is happening. It is with the Philistine blessing of those who prefer cheap fuel to human life and freedom ideals that killings of people in Ukraine continue to this very day. And the human life value has been trampled into the dirt of mass graves of Bucha. We in Ukraine commemorate Bucha today, and we will never forgive and never forget. However, so for new Buchas not to happen, all you have to do, dear world, is when next time you will bump into the choice between ideals of freedom and petrol prices, please choose properly. Thank you. It was Henry Kyiv on UATV channel telling the hard truth in simple terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more.